everyone. Today is Monday, June 27th, 2022. The time now is 6 p.m. and I'll call to order this regular meeting of the Town of Mead Board of Trustees. In accordance with the town's disaster declaration dated March 21, 2020, related to the COVID-19 virus and the town's emergency electronic participation policy for regular and special meetings, this meeting will be held virtually in Zoom. Virtual access information, including the Zoom meeting link, have been provided on the town's website and at designated posting places. I'd like to remind everyone present, both in person and virtually, of the town's general guidelines of the public comment at open meetings. Copies of the guidelines are available back in the room of this room here in Town Hall and are available online. There are 2 public comment periods on the agenda tonight. You may address the board on any subject, whether it is on the agenda or not. Mary, roll call, please.
Mayor Whitlow.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here.
Trustee Babcock. Trustee Broadhead. Here. Trustee Cartwright.
Here.
Trustee Harris. Trustee Schranz.
Here.
Mayor Whitlow, today is Monday, June 27th, 2022, and you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. As we are nearing the 4th of July Independence Day holiday, please join me in a moment of silence for our forefathers and the government leaders who have served or are serving this great country. Thank you for your time, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next is our review and approve agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as is. Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Broadhead.
Yes.
Trustee Schranz.
Yes.
Trustee Cartwright.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to our staff report by our town manager. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. You have my report. I do have a couple updates. Every 2 weeks I report to you that Highland Lake is nearing completion, but it's complete. I was out today, walked out on the pier. It's all finally manicured. Bathrooms look great. Just absolutely, I mean, this is something you all could be really proud of. It is, I just think it's fantastic. The pier looks like it's always been there. You know, it doesn't look like an intrusion into the park, but so often when you do those type of improvements. So big shout out to Erica and her team for getting the design done and getting it built. And I know it took a little longer than we'd hoped, but it's fantastic. And another thing I do want to point out, we are experimenting with natural grasses at some of the parks. I think you've seen it at Founders. It's really looking good there. We're working through it out at Mead Ponds. And you know, we have had some people complain about it, and we are going to put some signs up so people understand what's going on, but we're trying to develop the native grasses so it actually looks more natural. So we'll be getting social media out to let people know that as well. And then finally, I did want to just update you on Xfinity. You may wonder, you know, we had the groundbreaking and we got the fence up. Well, in the meanwhile, they've moved the building, the main building, about 10 feet to the east. So they had to redo their building plans. Because as you know, from when the site plan got approved, they're looking at the opportunity of maybe putting a car wash in. So they're moving the building and eliminating a building they were gonna have east of there. So it's going through approval right now with our staff and with Safeville. So that's what the delay is. I don't imagine it'll take much longer, but they had to go back to their architects and engineers and just change some of the floor elevations. So that's all I have.
before I ask for questions, what's the timeline for that after? I mean, what's the, what happens after that?
So what you're gonna see is they're gonna start the foundation on the building, they've done some preliminary grading and install the utilities, and concurrently they'll be coming to us with a process to allow a car wash, which is a PUD amendment, I believe. So what they'll be doing is tracking on both of those, so the building will start to go up, and if they're successful in getting the car wash approved, then they'll continue. I would imagine the whole process is gonna probably take about 12 months now. Typically, it's about 9 months, that's what Ziggy's took, but with adding the car wash, it may take a little bit longer.
All right, thanks, Helen. Questions or comments for Helen? Dave, do you have any questions or comments for Helen?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Fantastic news about Highland Lake. Thank you very much for all the work. Appreciate it. We've been working really hard since we purchased the land so many years ago. So anyway, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to our informational item for the evening, 2021 financial audit. And this will be introduced by our town clerk treasurer, Mary Scott.
Hello, Mayor, trustees. Every year the town is required to have audited financial statements prepared, and this year we have Clifton Larson Allen preparing them for us as they did last year. We've been working with them for about 3 months now, and it's been a pretty good, maybe it's only been 2 months, I exaggerate. But it's been pretty good. We have draft financial statements for you today that I passed out right before the meeting, and we will all proudly say to you that those are draft financial statements. We're still working on dotting the last I's and crossing the last T's. But with that, I'm gonna let them be presented. I think, Sam? This is Sam, I don't know how to say your last name, Hellwig with CLA, and he'll come present to you. It's you? Okay.
Good evening, and thank you, Mary. Like you said, I think we started in the middle of April for this engagement, so we took a little bit of June off, some PTO schedules and whatnot. So really, it's been a great process since April working on this audit engagement. But like Mary said, this is the audit of the December 31st, 2021 financial statements. So really, this is a draft format, this 67-page document right now, and what that means is that we're very close to the end. We have our quality control process of review to go through, and typically we don't see anything major pop up there. Maybe some questions that we need to discuss with Mary and Lorraine, but at the end of the day, this is substantially complete in its current form. So the only thing that's really missing is going to be the report date that we'll provide once we know it. So I'm going to go to page 1 of this document, and looking at the table of contents, scroll right past that. We get really 3 pages of this document. The rest of them are your financial statements, the town's financial statements. But the independent audit report is on pages 1 through 3. And there is a slight change over last year if you look at, compare the documents. There's a new auditing standard for reporting that is in effect for 2021 year engagements and going forward. But basically it updated the format a little bit in our audit report, expanded it to 3 pages, and it moved really the opinion to the very front, which is, we get to express the good news that in all material respects, the town's financial statements are materially accurate. So you can use these documents and this information going forward for all of your future planning, and I know you're deep into that being already almost July 4th. But that's what the first couple pages say, or first paragraphs rather, is that the opinion over the government activities, business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information is materially correct. So we conduct our audit in accordance with accounting principles, generally accepted in the United States of America. Pages 1 and 2 continues on to say the responsibilities of management for the financial statements, our responsibilities as auditors, and so management is responsible for the development of internal controls and the preparation of these financial statements, and ultimately the responsibility for accepting our services for preparing this document. In terms of the audit process, we go through a risk assessment process, so it's a risk-based approach about how to conduct our procedures starting in April, and even before that with planning discussions with you as members of the town board, with management, etc. We develop our understanding of internal controls and then design our substantive procedures from there on. On page 3, it discusses the required supplementary information as well as the supplementary information, and really goes into what is a part of the basic financial statements, what is the services that we are required to opine on, or provide an opinion on, and so that goes into some more information on those 3 pages. Starting on page 4 is where you go through the management's discussion and analysis, and I believe that continues through page 12. That information is really a synopsis of the year, the high points, if you will, for 2021, and it also provides a quick paragraph at the end towards, conditions looking ahead in 2022, anything that might be really significant for the town. So, in terms of, the meat and potatoes of our audit, we go into the management's discussion and analysis. We do look at that, but we don't provide an opinion on it. We tie those numbers to the rest of the basic financial statements that start on page 13. But in terms of, if you wanted a quick summary, a quick read, this would be a great area to look at. So as we go into page 13, the statement of net position, going thereafter, 14, 15, with our statements of activities and the balance sheet, these are the basic financial statements. So this section here, starting on page 13, going all the way through the notes to the financial statements, that's what we are required to audit. That's our audit opinion that we provide assurance over. So everything from page 13 all the way towards the back, right until you get to the compliance report for the state and local highway report, that's where we're providing our audit opinion over. So, Lorraine, correct me if you're going to provide any more significant details into these basic financial statements, but for now, all I really wanted to highlight was that, the town's net position as well as the fund balances for the town and their major funds as well as the non-major funds, really did a great, saw significant increases this year in terms of 2021 compared to 2020. We audited considerations of COVID-19 impacts. That was our first year with the town, 2020, and then going into 2021. So we're happy to be back. We did a lot of our procedures here on site, which was great. We got to meet, inquire, and do a lot of our testing on site. So all in all, a really great process. So with that, anything else, Lorraine, that you wanted to touch on?
I'm gonna give a little more detail later. Next.
Perfect. Any questions there from the town just over this basic financial statements in the draft?
Do you have any questions, Lee? Okay. No, sir, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
The other document that we are required to share with governance is the final governance communication. I say final, it is in draft format currently, but it is this four-page document right here. And it goes over again that we audited the financial statements of the town for December 31st, 2021. It goes over really the high points of what we are required to communicate, including significant accounting policies of the town. Were there any changes in those policies, which are summarized in note 1 to the financial statements? There were no new accounting policies adopted by the town in 2021. It also goes into accounting estimates if there were significant discretionary items that were estimates by management. Were there any changes to those estimates over a prior year? And there were no such significant changes to those estimates. We disclose any financial statement disclosures that were particularly sensitive. There's no particularly sensitive disclosures. We would also identify any significant unusual transactions or difficulties encountered during the audit, any discussions with other CPA firms, other accountants, and none of those transactions, no difficulties encountered. So again, a clean process start to finish. The second page does go into uncorrected misstatements and corrected misstatements, and I'll touch on those briefly. The uncorrected misstatements would be if there was an item that we determined to be missing from the financial statements, or potentially a balance that was understated or overstated, but it's not necessarily material to that fund or the overall financial statements, we can choose to pass on that that adjustment in discussions with management. So in terms of this draft document so far, there's only one uncorrected misstatement that relates to the OPEB liability. There was the pension liability that is booked by the town, and OPEB is the other post-employment benefit. So that's just the other piece that's associated with pension. That was similar to last year from an uncorrected misstatement. It's in draft format now, so I'm going to be still working with Mary and Lorraine on that in case that is no longer needed to be an uncorrected misstatement. It is subject to certain guidance and interpretation, so that's one piece that may change in the final document. The corrected misstatement would be if we made a change and it was posted as an auditor adjustment, we came in, we saw something, it got put back onto the financial statements. That's what a corrected misstatement was. And the only one that's outlined, I will say, as a corrected misstatement in air quotes, is related to CIP, construction and process, and it was for the town's development of this building. So it was missing from the first schedule that we got for construction and process, and then it was simply added. So if you think about it from a full accrual statement, that's the only impact. The funds were there, the expenses were there, they were proper of the town. It was simply classifying them from an expense to an asset on the government-wide financials. Other than that, that's really the gist of the report that I wanted to present. So any questions over this final document? Final draft document.
Good, good. Sam, it's always good to see you again.
Great to see you. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you for your time too. Lorraine.
Hi, part two here. Hello, Mayor and Council. It's always nice to be here and to go over these financials with you. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate the auditor's report. My follow-up is a little bit more in how you're going to use these statements rather than how the audit went and what the auditors are looking for and finding. And so I always like to couch this in terms of your fiduciary responsibility to know about the financials of the city and to kind of take this opportunity to walk you through it so that you can either delve in later and know where you want to start, or you can say, I review it, I get the gist of it, I understand and I'm fine with the financials of the city for 2021 and put it on your shelf. So as Sam said, his auditor's report at the beginning is wonderful because it's what you call a clean opinion. There's no red flags being stated by the auditors as to how your financial accounting and reporting is at the end of 12/21. I'm going to page 4, where that management's discussion and analysis starts, is a little mini report of what the numbers mean that are in the audit. So if you ever wish to delve into this or read through this, it's a good starting point, as Sam mentioned. But it's also really handy if you get a question from a student or a reporter or something about how's the city doing, how's the town doing on its finances. You could say, oh, doing really well. I'm going to call you back in about 5 minutes. I've got some specifics for you. Grab this and tell them, oh, here's the financial highlights from 2021. And net position increased by $8 million. So that's a real good highlight to have on hand or to be able to tout. And that's 23% of where it was the year before. So that's really good. And then it talks about the governmental funds and how they marked an increase of almost $4 million themselves in the most of your funds that aren't your sewer enterprise fund. And then it says the town sewer enterprise did increase by 3%. It's more of a steady operation and what you've got going with all the ones that reflect the development in progress. So using this document gives you a lot of information about accounting here, but the main thing to know is that you've got 2 different types of funds that have to be accounted here in the town of Mead. You've got governmental funds where you're tracking the money. You're saying, do we have enough money coming in to do all the things we have to do to pay for police and administration and community development and any capital outlay we need? Versus proprietary fund, which is your sewer fund, which you're tracking your total economic situation, including your capital assets and its depreciation and when you're going to need to rebuild wastewater treatment plants and pipes in the ground, etc. The governmental is what they call the flow of financial resources, money in, money out, and what's left at the end of the year that you can use for next year. Whereas the proprietary is the flow of economic resources. Oh, if we were to sell our sewer system or buy a package plant or do something different in that regard, this is how it would be shown in a company document, so to speak. And you'll especially use that as showing your big assets there if you ever want to issue bonds or get another loan for future expansion of your wastewater treatment plant or your sewer system. So looking at page 6, the whole rest of this little section here talks about those 2 different types of activities you're tracking. The regular governmental activities where you need enough money to operate and have police and vital services and recreation. and your business type, which is just your sewer fund. So for the governmental activities, it shows for the past 2 years, if you look at the bottom line, the total net position, you can see there's that $8 million improvement from one year to the other. And you can see that a lot of that is in capital assets. The second line there went from $12.4 million in 2020 to $16.5 million. And that's a lot of this capital improvement projects that you've got going on. In the business type activities, you've got a more stable operation. You've got your cash assets are about $1.1 million or $2 million both years, and your capital assets are about $5.4 million both years. So not a lot happening in this year to change that. Down below it tells you how 45.6% of this town's total net position is represented by its capital assets. And that's, you know, for 2021, the total column, 21 million out of the 52 million in assets is those capital assets, which doesn't just include the sewer assets, but your buildings, your parkland, you know, anything else, vehicles, equipment, infrastructure, that type of thing as well. Moving over to page 7, we have what would be equivalent to the income statement if you were running a business. This is the results of 1 year of operations on the income statement versus page 6, which is what you've accumulated over time. You've had this many assets be built or bought, you owe this much money, etc. You've accumulated this much cash. But over on page 7, it's just what happened this year. Did your revenues that you charge for things cover what you pay? Well, as with most places, the governmental activities, your program revenues, where you're charging for the services you're providing, never cover your cost of government. You don't charge money for police services or to drive on the streets. You have to have taxes that are going to help you have money for that. And so that's what the general revenues are. So in the first column there for governmental activities, you see the charges for services. There are building permit fees and other charges that you have, court fine fees, etc. And you get some grants and things, but most of your big money on the governmental activities, those 7-digit figures are rolling in from taxes. It's not the same on the business type activities. Look down those 2 columns. Most of their revenues are coming in from charges for services and nothing from taxes, which is what you want. You want to be able to run an enterprise fund that supports itself and you don't have to subsidize with taxes. And that means your sewer rates are sufficient to operate the fund. These charts on the next couple pages kind of show that. For the revenues by source for governmental funds on page 8, you see the dark blue is charges for services, but then when you move down to the green and the purple, that's property taxes and sales taxes. That's over half of your revenues coming right in there from those 2 sources. And the bar chart below shows that your program revenues really, except for community development, where you have a policy of growth paying for itself, those red bars, which are the revenues associated with provision of those services, are below, and that's why you need those taxes. We'll go over to, you can take a look at the page 9, the business type activities, and that's the opposite there, where charges for services are 75% of that circle of revenues, and your capital grants and contributions are about 1/4 because of the grants you're getting. The program revenues are outpacing the expenses in the bar chart below. So we're going to go over to page 14 now, and this is where the more typical just numbers as opposed to graphs and pictures are. But there's 2 statements in these financial statements that Sam referred to as your MDY statements, and when he talked about putting the capital construction in progress onto the balance sheet. When you look at these governmental activities on page 13, you see those capital assets not being depreciated and being depreciated of like 16 million on that financial, on those assets there. But if you look at page 15, which is just your governmental fund types that don't track economic resources, they track financial, you don't see any capital assets there. So fund accounting, which is what we're required to do throughout the year, is just tracking for these governmental funds the money in and the money out. And we're not saying, oh, but we have the asset of the town hall, we could sell that and provide police services. We're not thinking that way, so it's not accounted for that way. It's what are your revenues and expenditures gonna be. So on 15, there's no assets from the capital. There's 10,000,007 showing there on page 15 for the general fund. We should actually look at the total, the 28.8 for all those governmental funds. And back at page 13, it's 45 million. So there's a procedure that's done at year end to move those assets out of capital outlay and put the value of them onto the financial statements in case people wanna ask, well, but you do have these assets, so what is your real bottom line? These first two statements show you that with the assets and your long-term debt as well that's associated with them. So 13 and 14 are what they call government-wide. If everything was accounted for like the sewer fund is, including the assets and the long-term liabilities, those are your statements. Going forward though, we're just gonna look at these individual funds, which is what you're used to looking at in your financial statements from month to month, and what you're gonna be using as a starting point when you start budgeting next month. So these are the assets and liabilities on page 15. Page 17 is where you're used to seeing the revenues and the expenditures roll in. So general fund on page 17 shows 8.7 million in revenues and 6.2 in expenditures with some transfers out. And the net change in the fund balance down near the bottom, the third line from the bottom, for general fund was 1,041,000. So you still had a growth in your general fund balance at the end of the year. You usually have some budget habits of moving that growth to the capital improvement fund for the next year, so we will still do that if you'd want to stick with that plan. But for the accounting of what happened in the general fund, that's how you get the 1,041,000 there. You have the Mead Urban Renewal Authority shown as a governmental fund type. It is what's called a component unit of your government, and you have enough control over it that it's shown right here like a regular fund, not separately issued financial statements or some separate section in the back. It's just rolled right into your financial statements. And it had a net change in fund balance of 637,000, where revenues exceeded expenditures by 637,000 during the year. Municipal facilities, look at those impact fees rolling in from development. In municipal facilities, transportation, and some from what are called non-major funds, which are in the back, we'll show you. 4.5 million in 2021 from development fees, impact fees. And they'll be needed to provide all these services and expenditures that are down below as time goes on, if not immediately. And they're restricted to the needs of the town that are caused by growth, the capital needs. So those are the governmental funds, and just to show you real quick what's in that non-major governmental funds column, we'll go back to page 49 and 50 in the back of this packet. Major funds are funds that have assets or liabilities or revenues or expenditures of significant volume that they're called major compared to the other funds. But these are the non-major funds back here, and you've got quite a few of them. So if you look on page 50, there's the revenues and expenditures for those 7 other funds that operate and that we track separately based on their usage. The Conservation Trust Fund, your Downtown Revitalization Fund, which is being drawn down, and your Capital Improvement Fund, which I mentioned earlier, Storm Drainage, Parks and Open Space, Art and Public Places, Police Impact Fund. These are all non-major, but they all have revenues and requirements on how those can be used. Page 49 shows their ending fund balances and whether they're restricted or committed to capital projects. So Conservation Trust Fund, for instance, is restricted to Conservation Trust Fund purposes, that's your lottery money, only parks and certain recreation purposes. to the front, that's just where that column comes forward. We'll go a little quicker now through to page 19. And this is the proprietary fund, which is the sewer fund, operated like a business. We always show the capital and the liabilities on the face of the financial statements here. You see on page 19, one of the bigger numbers on the page is non-current liabilities for notes payable. And that's your loan from the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. And it tells you right there what you still owe in more than 1 year on that note, $1.5 million. We turn the page to page 20, and here's your revenue, income statement, revenue and expenditures, income statement, expenses. And it's showing you the results of operations for 1 year. So here's those revenues coming in. We saw those in the earlier page, $833,000. Expenses were $798,000. See that depreciation is $278,000? That's an expense, but it's not cash out the door. It's just a drawdown of what the value of this fund's in that position is. And so you had operating revenue of $34.7. So that's good. It's in the black. It's not really large. It's small revenue. So when you do your budgeting and think about your policies for your rate setting, you really need to keep that in mind as prices are going up in this time of inflation about where your sewer rates need to be and what your plan is for reviewing those and whether that needs, stay the course that you're on or whether there's going to be any changes needed to that to make sure you have operating income coming out of this fund. The plant investment fees, those come from your development, so even this sewer fund has some, pay for itself, future growth that's going to be needed, more capacity that will be needed because of the growth that's happening. We're going to skip over to page 1 now. I'm sorry, to note 1, which is on page 22. And we'll just skim through these notes because in here is probably answers to questions that you might get asked that you might ordinarily think, how would I know? And there's a lot of information in here. The reporting entity tells you that it's just the town and the MURA that you're responsible for as far as the fiduciary responsibility. That's it. There's no other entity lurking out there. There's no metro district that's part of your reporting entity. It's just the town proper and the MURA that are part of your reporting property. And then it tells you what these various terms are and how we use them, if there's options in governmental accounting. You probably don't care too much about some of those, but at the bottom of page 23 it starts talking about the major governmental funds and what they're for. So if you're, you have those 4 major governmental funds plus the sewer fund, that you can focus somebody's attention on, or if you get some college student who wants to know about municipal finance, you can say, oh, we'll focus on these funds here, these are the major ones in town. Then we show you how we treat things, capital assets, tells you how long they're depreciated, and it's over $5,000, and compensated absences, what's that? It's the amounts you have to pay if someone quit and they had leave they hadn't taken yet, and long-term obligations, etc. Going over to page 27, it shows you what you can invest in, and this is determined by state statutes. So you're limited to pretty conservative investments. You can't really invest in the stock market or something like that. And then you've got the total, the little tally there on the chart shows you that as of the end of the year, essentially all your investments were in the local government investment pools, which is a little different from past years where you've had some, for a while, individual investment houses that you were working with. And through the finance committee and talks amongst ourselves, we said, let's use those local government investment pools. That's what they're for. They're for small towns that don't have an investing staff that's keeping their eye on the market, and they do pretty well, and they were doing better than your other investments were. So you've got a lot of money invested there. And you've got it diversified amongst 3 local government investment pools that are there for that purpose, to pool the money of all these small towns or big cities, they're in it too, and get a higher rate than you would ever get on your own. Then we go over to the capital assets on page 29. And this shows you the activity during the year. You did add all this construction in progress, building these streets and interchanges and trails and buildings. They're being depreciated, and you went from 12,000,004 at the beginning of the year to 16,500,000 at the end. So even though you've got all this cash coming in, you are using it to buy and prepare, buy capital assets, build them, and prepare for what your needs are as the growth ensues. Over on page 31, if anyone says, I hear you're leasing all these equipment, well, here tells you what you're leasing, how much is left at the end of the year. These are lease purchase contracts for the various dump trucks, and it explains them, it tells what their interest rates were, etc. Then on the next page, you've got the business type activities, which has the larger amount from the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority for the wastewater treatment plant, and a premium associated with that, and then the amount that would be owed if everyone were to quit or retire or move on at the same point and had to pay all their leave that they hadn't taken yet. On page 33, there's a requirement with that power loan, water and power loan, that you have to have a certain amount in reserve to be in good stead with what you agreed when you borrowed the money. And so this shows down the bottom, net revenue excess is almost 500,000. So you've got plenty of money covering what you promised you would have in order to have this loan. Then we get to interfund transactions, which kind of shows those transfers in and out. And we think we've got most of the money moved around for the projects that you probably wanted, and there may not be so many transfers in the future moving forward, but we'll see. You always have that option to transfer money from one fund to the other, if it's not against the use of the money. But then there's a big note here about your defined pension plan, and that is the police department's pension for the sworn police officers that are in the state's FPPA, it's the Colorado Fire and Police Pension Association. And there's a giant requirement of disclosure about how much risk of that whole statewide pool falls on the town if they should default. So essentially that's what the next 5 pages are about. And you don't have anything at the moment to worry about there. Risk management on page 40 talks about how you cover your risks with insurance by being part of the CIRSA. And then note 11 talks about the Tabor Amendment and how you're required to have 3% of your operations essentially set aside as reserve. And we always talk about during your budget process having way more than that in case you have a sudden catastrophe and your revenues go away or get knocked out by a tornado or something. So this Tabor Amendment is minuscule compared to what you have in your fund balances, which are all healthy. More pension information follows that on page 42. Page 43 starts the budget to actual comparison. So the same numbers are in the actual columns as we went over up front, but it shows you how they compare to what you budgeted at the beginning of the year. You didn't have any budgetary problems. You didn't overspend any of your budgets. And that goes forward until you get to page 49, where we already looked for those combining information for the non-major funds. And their budget actuals follow that. We get to page 58. This chart kind of does the opposite of what those first statements did. Those first statements, we said we're going to show the governmental activities as if they were enterprise funds, and you had to show the capital and everything on them. Well, this one kind of is the reverse. It says, well, what were you just spending money-wise with the sewer fund? Because you have to adopt a budget and appropriate money to be spent, and you want to see if you follow the budget there without all these other things like depreciation for the 278,000 figuring into that, and that shows you that you're fine there as well. Compliance is just a requirement from your state legislature or the feds about how you spent money that came for highway purposes, and it's always in the back of the audit. So So with that, I hope this is helpful for you as we start the budget process. Those ending fund balances are your starting point for 2022. And as you know, we'll look at where we are this year, so we'll start with that. It'll be the last real number, this final, and what we do when we plan for the budget for 2023 that we'll start looking at in a month or so, or longer. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or later, about anything in here.
Thanks, Lorraine. Do you have any questions? Mayor Pro Tem Adams, do you have any questions or comments if you're still with us? His connection's up and down today, so.
No, I do not at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Sam, for being here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for your time going through with us.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. All right. Next is our proclamation for Parks and Recreation for the month of July 2022. Our EIO, Lorelei Nelson, who is also our Community Engagement Officer, Director, I just promoted you. Director, Officer, talk a little bit about our program in Mead. So, sorry about the promotion.
Thank you. So in honor of Parks and Recreation, I kind of want to give you an overview of where we're at, where we're going. So overall, we've seen an increase in registration across all of our sports. Specifically, baseball was our biggest increase this summer. Crafty Critters was a new program that we held this summer. The last day was today, and overwhelmingly, the parents loved it. They dropped their toddlers off, they left for an hour, and it really went over well. We do have fall soccer and fall volleyball open right now, so we're taking registrations for that. On the horizon, we have Girls on the Run in October, and then basketball this winter. July kicks off our adult recs, so we will have cornhole in the month of July, followed by an adult volleyball tournament in August, and then another cornhole league in September. Our older active adult programs are doing really well. The Empower field trip was really good. We're looking at a Stanley Hotel trip or a brewery trip, and we're also looking for the Denver Ballet Nutcracker this winter. Meals Out is another thing that they're doing, so once a month we go to a restaurant in Longmont or a surrounding area. We're averaging about 25 participants, which is really good. Gets them a chance to get out and try different foods. Our next one is actually a picnic in the park, which will be held at Town Hall, and that's their favorite one. And Anytime Fitness, they continue to host our senior exercise program, and we are continually adding participants to that program. The biggest change going into community events this year is our beverage garden. So you may notice it looks a little bit different. The town actually applied for the alcohol permit, and the chamber is the designated event manager. With the alcohol permit, we submitted a map that allows consumption in the entire park, except for a small southwest corner where we have strategically placed the stage and cover. So if any of you guys get a chance to come out to the concerts, it looks completely different. The layout is nice and new. Our first one was last Thursday. It was very successful. We had upwards of 275 people. A lot of positive feedback, particularly on the LED from our youth programs, but also at the concert in the park. People are getting information from the LED. They're contacting me or Kaylin to ask questions, and that's really kind of what the point of the LED was, is to get our information out there and have that engagement. So next up with Rockin' and Reelin' is Karate Kid, the original Karate Kid. And that'll be this Thursday. And then on Monday, we have our July 4th bike parade. National Night Out is the first Tuesday in August. This will be a big deal. We have Trouble in the Heartland, which is a Bruce Springsteen tribute band. We'll have police
vehicles, fire vehicles, and public works vehicles. And Grandview is bringing their bounce house, popcorn, snow cones. And then we have also booked the In-N-Out cookout truck, and they'll be providing grilled cheeses, and a variety of burgers. And then we'll also have water, drinks, chips. The Wall That Heals. We are full speed ahead on this. Between our department, public works, police, we're all kind of gearing up together. We have 4 pretty substantial corporate sponsorships, and they're doing different things. So FedEx has agreed to do the setup. TBK Bank has agreed to do the teardown. Boulder Scientific, we're still negotiating how they want to contribute. And then Street Media Group is going to put the Wall That Heals on I-25 billboard. We are working on educational tours, and we're finalizing the opening and closing ceremonies for the event. So we are continuously taking volunteers. It is a 4-day, 24-hour event. So we're getting volunteers trickle in. A lot of support from the community, it looks like, and a lot of people are continuously signing up, so good. And then Mead Community Day, we have not forgotten about you. We have vendor registration open and accepting. We've already booked our 3 food trucks and our 3 dessert trucks. We have also booked bungee trampoline, a tree climb, a laser tag, face painting, and henna. And then we also have our 2 bands booked in addition to fireworks. So everything's kind of laid out, and we're moving on it. So the community day will be from 4 to 9:30. So we did shorten it a little bit from last year. Last year it was 2 to 9:30, but that 2 to 4 is extremely hot and kind of a dead period for the vendors, so we shortened it up a little bit, and we jammed everything into that 4 to 9:30 time slot. Any questions?
What's the date?
For Community Day, September 10th.
Wow, okay, questions, comments? Wow, got a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Thank you very much. David, do you have any questions for Lorelei?
No, great job.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, Trustee Schrass, will you please read the proclamation for Parks and Rec?
I will. Declaring July 2022 as Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas Parks and Recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Mead, Colorado. And whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And whereas Parks and Recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas Parks and Recreation program increase the community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development and produce habitat for wildlife, and whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the town of Mead recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees that July is recognized as Parks and Recreation Month in the town of Mead. Given under my hand and sealed the town of Mead, Colorado, on this 27th day of June 2022. Signed, Colleen G. Whitlow, Mayor.
Thank you very much, and thank you, trustee Cartwright, for helping.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve the signing of this proclamation?
I'll make a motion to approve the signing of the proclamation.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Brian.
Trustee Strands,
Yes.
trustee Broadhead,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams,
Yes.
trustee Cartwright,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, next is our public comment, our first public comment of the evening. The board welcomes public comment for any item, whether it is on the agenda or not. The board will listen to your comments and take them into consideration. If you desire conversation, please email the board or the town manager or attend the monthly coffee with the mayor. If you're with us virtually, please indicate by raising your hand to speak. When you're recognized, please state your name and address for the record. Again, if you wish to speak during this public comment period, please adhere to the town general guidelines. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board of trustees. If you're representing a group, you will have 5 minutes. Is there anyone in the room that would like to speak during this public comment period? Okay, seeing none, is there anybody with us virtually that would like to speak with us this evening? Just raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda for the night. The consent agenda contains items which are considered routine and enacted in one motion and vote. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call please, Mary.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams,
Yes.
trustee Broadhead,
Yes.
trustee Cartwright,
Yes.
trustee Strands,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to our public hearing of the evening. Okay, this is Access 25 Metropolitan District, numbers 1 through 6. And based on the agenda item summary in our board packet, staff is recommending that we open and continue the public hearing for the Access 25 Metropolitan District Service Plans. Is that correct, Ms. Young? Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Okay, is there a motion to open and continue the public hearing for the night?
I move to open and continue the public hearing on service plan for the Access 25 Metropolitan Districts, numbers 1 to 6, to Monday, July 11th, 2022, at 6 p.m. or as soon as possible thereafter, with the continued public hearing to be conducted at the Mead Town Hall, 441 3rd Street in Mead, Colorado.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call please.
Trustee Cartwright,
Yes.
trustee Strands,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams,
Yes.
trustee Broadhead,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. Our motion carries. We'll move on to our second public comment of the evening, and there's no new business tonight, so we'll just move on to this agenda item. Would anybody with us virtually would like to speak, then you've got a second chance here. All right, seeing none. We'll move on to our elected official reports, and I'm gonna start with Mayor Pro Tem Adams, since he's not with us, he's with us virtually. Did you wanna, tell us any reports on anything that you wanted to bring up tonight, David?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to touch base on, 3 quick points from CML, just to kind of get everybody in the loop that didn't get a chance to go. I attended 3 wonderful meetings. One was on emergency info and PIO involvement in the community, for emergencies. I want to set up a meeting with our, Helen, yourself, and our PIO, and kind of cover some ground, some things that I think are very important to help us be prepared for the future and what lies beyond, because again, emergencies happen. all the time. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when we're gonna have one that will hit us. Two is our, what they call the crew, our crisis response unit. They had this, done with somebody that came in and talked about it from Northland. They are doing some wonderful things with providing and helping, individuals in the community, reach out, for crisis response and care and prevention. So, more to come on that as well. And then I talked and listened in on one that was on water and wastewater improvements, regarding grants and loans for projects and improvements. There's opportunities there for us as well to capitalize on some of those things so that we can continue to grow and develop. And that's all that I've got for right now.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll get staff to follow up with some of those items that you brought up. Maybe we could do maybe a recap before the next meeting. And then, we can go from there. I know that, Brooke had some items that she wanted to bring up, and we'll bring those up at the next meeting on the classes or sessions that she, attended. And so I know that email was, instrumental in getting us our fire lit again underneath us. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, for bringing that to our attention, and thank you for going to those sessions.
Absolutely, it was wonderful, and like I said, it was great to have the interactions and be able to sit through some things that a lot of times we do forget about in our town that give us that refocus. So came at a very critical time, I think, and more to come. I will definitely report out more once we have meetings and actually look at implementing some of these things into our plan.
Thank you very much. Stephanie, anything? Okay, Chris? Okay, Carmen?
Yes, I do. I also had the opportunity to go to CML this year. This is my 5th CML conference, and each time I go, I learn something new and come walking away somewhat energized with stuff that I've learned. I went to many sessions, but there are 2 particular sessions that kind of stood out for me. One of them dealt with aging population, which really kind of surprised me. If you look at the state of Colorado, the aging population, 68% of the population of Colorado resides in the 75 to 84-year-old group, which is kind of blew me away. This is, you've got a lot of retired people here, but that was a very large number. But the more disturbing number was the 0 to 20 age group that only represented about 1.5% growth. Which kind of, if you look at it and extrapolate that out into the future, says we don't have very much coming back at us in the form of the ability to staff and things of that nature. Those are usually entry-level kinds of positions that are filled by that age group, and when you only have 1.5% growth there, it helps explain why we're having such a hard time staffing, because it's just, the bodies aren't there. So the 30 to 50-year-old groups are all having children, but a lot of them are only having like 1 child. So you grow 2 adults, but you only give back 1 child, which could become a problem as we go down the road. If that trend kind of continues, it's going to become an issue. Then for the older people, it becomes an issue because now we don't have people feeding into Social Security, Medicare, things of that nature. So our future generations may be impacted by some of that kind of stuff. I found that to be very, very interesting, and it gave me a whole different insight to what's going on. And that's just the state of Colorado, so you can imagine what happens if you look at it at a national level, and what that does. The second session I went to, actually I didn't go to, it was a keynote speaker, and it was the conversation, or the session was conflict to conversation. And this gentleman, I thought, presented a very, very interesting and exciting presentation that kind of dealt with conflict that we all have, and how we turn that into conversations and bringing that down to a level such as this is how does a board of trustees communicate with its constituency? And how do we get information back? And I know that I've been guilty of this, and I'm sure you all have had opportunities. We don't get very much information directly from our constituency. We make assumptions for them, we vote on things that we think they do, but we don't seem to do enough effort to go out and contact the constituency and ask simple questions like, how's the board doing? Or what kinds of things has the board done that you like or dislike? And just start collecting some input. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, because it was a very long and great presentation, but the things I walked away with, the one thing I kind of walked away with that I see happen for us all the time, is when we have a citizen come up to the podium and talk to us, we are all very polite and listen. But when they polled all of the trustees that were in that room and they asked them, how do you think that person felt after they got off the podium? And the overwhelming majority was they felt that they were unheard. And how does the board of trustees feel about that? We were frustrated. So you have frustration and not being heard as two key elements when citizens do come up to us. And I know that in my time, I've witnessed some of that. We're very polite and listen, but we provide no input, provide nothing. Not even any real confirmation that we heard what they said. The key thing that he kind of said that really made touch base with me was the citizens should never feel defeated. When they come up to talk to you, they should never walk away from that podium feeling defeated. And that's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to give them something. They're asking for something, they need something, they're looking for guidance, and we have a responsibility to provide something back to them instead of, thank you very much, next. Because that's kind of what we kind of feel. So I personally have walked away with that and said, yeah, I think I am going to make sure some of those kinds of things happen. We've got meet and greet tomorrow night. It's an opportunity for us to engage with the community, start asking some of those questions, and start bringing some of that information back. You notice that we very, very seldom have a citizenship here. Very, very seldom. Why is that? We have to find ways to get it in. There was a breakout session afterwards, and even though I absorbed all of this, I went to that breakout session and said, how do you motivate the constituency to come in and talk to you? How do you make that happen? It's easy to say this is what should happen, but how do you get them to talk to you? And the easy answer is, well, they don't come to you, you go to them. That's okay. And how do we do that? And we got lots of different kinds of input, but it seemed to be, for me, input that came from larger communities, and communities where you're talking 20, 30, 50,000 population, where you have a lot more of those kinds of opportunities. But I tried to bring it back down to, we have a small community. And we don't have venues like, one guy said, we'll go to Walmart and just start talking to people. I don't have one. I have a Ziggy's, but right now it's kind of 90% populated with junior high school kids. They're not necessarily the parents who go to Ziggy's to where I can sit down and have meaningful conversations. So we have to kind of create our own venues to do these kinds of things. We have to, like I said, meet and greet's a great opportunity. The park activities that we have are great opportunities. And I guess I'm challenging the board of trustees that says we just need to get out and start talking to these people and start bringing some information back. I think if we do that, and the public sees that the trustees have a genuine interest, then maybe we'll see more people coming in, and maybe we'll get more information and more stuff coming back. Because I don't think we as trustees get a whole lot of feedback on what we're doing and how well we've done it, or have we done it well. We just do things, but we just don't get that feedback coming back to us. And I think that's important. So I I was somewhat energized by these sessions. I think that's the whole purpose of CML, it provides us some of these opportunities. Those of you who have not had a chance to go, I would encourage you to take an opportunity if you get it and go to it. There's a lot to be learned. And there's a lot of stuff that we already know, but you pick out the things that you want. So thank you for the opportunity to bring that information back.
Thank you. I wanted to say thanks to Mary for getting us all there. Thanks for everything you've done and all of the stuff that we've learned throughout the whole week. I think, we've learned more than usual. I think it was a really good conference. I wanted to say thank you to JVA for the dinner and for Marcus and his office for getting us out of our element and going to places and just have a good time and just kind of decompress and just tell each other what happened during the day. You know, what we learned and, you know, what we could do to improve, you know, what we do up here as a board. And so I thought it was really, really good. There was a couple of sessions that, outstanding one with, the conversations, with the conflict to conversations and the breakout sessions that we had. One of the ones that I went to, of course, was the Mayor Summit, and the mayors, we have a 2-hour kind of a session with just the mayors of all in Colorado. And it's interesting that no matter what size you are, we all have the same problems and the same goals and the same, you know, good things and bad things. So, but it's really good to network and find out what others do to get people engaged and try to, you know, make sure that you're you know, once you vote, you move forward as one voters, and it's really it's very, very interesting how, you know, the mayors try to do their best jobs, you know, and facilitating business meetings and, you know, having the empties on their, you know, nobody here and a few people on virtual versus, you know, the crowded, you know, Aurora and Denver and, you know, big places like that. But basically, you know, we have the same goal is to make sure we do our best up here, and I think we do a good job. You know, I think there's always room for improvement, but I just wanted to say thank you very much to staff, and I think it was a great time. So thank you very much. Coffee with the mayor is coming Saturday. Mary makes the best coffee, and we have some great conversations. So that'll be Saturday, and of course tomorrow is our meet, greet, and eat. I think I said it right. So we'll be at the Highlands from 6 to 7:30. So we'll be there, and hopefully you all will join us. And then of course July 4th is the wonderful bike parade that I almost fall off of my bike every time. Yes, believe me, it's fun. We all decorate, you know, our bikes and our fancy little, you know, handlebars. So that's all I have really. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the time that staff has put into the CML. I think CML is a great opportunity for people to network and meet people and try to figure out what we can do better for our town. So I appreciate the time, and we brought these cool little posters back for Deb and Chris and Tricia. So it was 100th year anniversary there. So they showed us all from where it came, of what it was at the beginning and where we are now. So I think it's a great stride of undertaking that they've done. So I don't have anything else before we go. Anything else? Ellen, do you have anything?
Yeah, tomorrow is election day.
Oh yeah, tomorrow. Tomorrow's election. Yeah. All right.
For the primaries.
For the primaries.
The primaries, yes.
Yep. Not here.
No.
Okay, with that, is there, well, we have enough, phone texting from candidates, I'm sure.
Yes.
So with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, roll call please, Mary.
Trustee Cartwright.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes.
Trustee Broadhead.
Yes.
Trustee Schran.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. The June 27th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Trustees is now adjourned at 7:09. Thank you very much.